things that are off the wall. The telephone company in New York recently disclosed that they screened 24,000 human beings to find 400 with sufficient skills to interact thoughtfully with people that they could enter at the most basic level and participate in their training. 400 out of 24,000 had those basic entry-level skills. So in a global, high-tech, information-based world where our children will have to work with knowledge, with research, and with other people more than with raw materials as they did in the industrial age, these are most precious gifts. So there are some common barriers that prevent young people from doing it. The absence of dialogue, our tendency to deal with superficials rather than go beneath it to see why that was important and how that would affect the way we do business. A tendency to gloss over feelings rather than acknowledge them and work with them, which you've talked about, all undercut this. Then there's a set of things we call the dirty dozen. And a real effective way to deal with them is know what they are. And then when they come up in communication, learn how to creatively and supportively help the person do it differently in working with you. I'd like to list the dirty dozen, and then we'll work on it in the follow-up session. Okay, one of the first barriers to effective communication is to show power. Don't give me that. As soon as I start to do that, I'm saying to the person, cover yourself up. Don't take any further risk to reach out to me because I'm more powerful than you are and I'm going to use it. So that's show of power. The next one, giving you messages. Well, you should know better than that. See, that's that shoulding upon people we talked about earlier. And I'm projecting it over to you and I'm saying because you don't see what I see, you're somehow deficient here. So try to avoid the you messages, okay? Oh, well, you should do this, you should do that, you should do the other. What am I doing there? I'm rescuing, enabling, directing, all those barriers that we talked about. A third one of the dirty dozen, advising. Well, I don't see why you just don't go over there and tell her to bug off. Well, see, might be easy and clear for me, but how do they begin to learn to work through? How do I even know that's appropriate? If it's a relationship I'm not part of, why am I meddling with it that way? If I respected that person, I would say, what do you believe might be an option in dealing with that person like that? In giving you messages instead of why don't you do this, turn it around and ask, how do you see yourself doing this instead of that, so that they can take ownership for it rather than advising. Instead of this showing power, don't give me that, say, now I'd really like to understand what it is that's going on for you because I hadn't expected that, rather than just shutting it out. Lecturing is another of the dirty dozen. So far we've got showing power, giving you messages, advising, lecturing. Well, we find in the flow of human existence that these are inherent little foibles that come along into everybody's. How many ever got sick of, well, when I was a child, or you should have grown up in the Depression when things were really tough. I mean, for most people, this is their reality. This is their moment. It doesn't help to know that you went through more hardship. In fact, recently I spent time with a person who was a guest. And this person was a very insecure person, so that the person never knew how to talk with anybody about anything that was important to them. If you said something that was important to you, one of my children did this, all 5 of mine did that, she would say. Well, we found this was helpful. Well, I taught all my children that when they were just 1 or 2. So the result was soon no one on the whole outing would spend any time with this person, and they felt lonelier and out of it because they didn't really know how to slip out of that mode of one-upping people, okay? Judging is another of the dirty dozen. Well, that was silly, that was stupid, or even worse yet, you were dumb to do that, okay? You should know better than that. And as soon as I judge people for what they do, feeling that judgment, they start to hide what's really going on for them from me. Another of the dirty dozen, non-specific praise. Oh, you're great. Oh, you're wonderful. Oh, you're just so awesome. It's been said that if you understand the appropriate usages of the words awesome and dude, you can communicate for over 30 minutes, credibly, with any adolescent in America. Because we found at least 30 different meanings for each word, depending on the context, your shrug, and your inflection. We call this McLanguage, and it reflects McThought, where you throw together entire statements using the same phrases repetitively with different inflections and meaning coming along. But that also reflects a kind of bankruptcy in terms of the inner capacity to think and express ideas more articulately. And often that comes from just giving non-specific praise rather than saying, I believe that was very helpful because. You just say, great. Now what do you know from that you didn't know, rather than being specific so they know what you're talking about. Name calling, how many of you have found that in communications? Okay, what's name calling? Dummy. Okay, stupid, silly. Okay, have you ever heard people do that? And as soon as I do that, that reduces the whole transaction to a single value judgment, usually aimed at you, rather than thoughtful interaction with what you were going through. Interpreting, I think, is a good one. Well, I believe that that was grossly unfair of you to even assume that she should respond that way. Well, see, as soon as I do that, what does that make the other person feel like? Why is it you're so smart and I'm always so dumb? And it's so very clear to you, but in the situation I didn't see it. It would have been more helpful for me to say, since that didn't work out very well for you, looking back at it, how do you think she might have interpreted that, or he might have been responding? I illustrated this to some people a while ago. Is communication always what we hear, or is it what is meant underneath? Is it possible the same words could have very different meanings to people? A while ago I said, how would you interpret this phrase? The little girl is afraid to run home because of the man in the mask. Now what message does that give some of you? The little girl is afraid to run home because of the man in the mask. What advice would we give her? How would you interpret the situation? Come on, try. Because we're going to run out of tape otherwise. Okay. Did any of you hear anything? Let's start there, because many of you are baby boomers, and unless it's explained, it's very difficult for you to understand. Are there some older people in here? How many of you envisioned a pervert lurking in the bushes, wearing a mask, okay, that could leap out at any moment? Is that a possibility? And would that meet all the requirements of that message? Okay. How many of you envisioned a little girl standing on third base, fearful to run to home plate because the catcher was there waiting to get her? Okay, so would that meet the criteria? So it could be she's stuck on third waiting for a coach to move her to home. It could be a pervert in the bushes. It could be that she saw the show Friday the 13th and is fearful that Jason is out there somewhere in that hockey mask, and that's a fantasy. All of those could meet the criteria for that circumstance. So we would have to explore what they understand rather than just judging it on the surface to really understand what they meant. Another of the dirty dozen is to give false assurances. I'm sure it will work out all right. Well, how on earth could I be sure that your life is going to work out all right? That's gratuitous. It's rescuing. It says I'm just going to salve over your real concerns and superimpose my version of reality so that I'll feel comfortable with it, rather than spend the time exploring what you really see as the possibilities and helping you work with them. Another one is attacking, okay? And it comes in, well, if you had just listened when I told you, that problem wouldn't have occurred. The person comes and say, I don't think you gave me correct instructions. What do you mean I didn't give you correct instructions? If you learn to listen, and see what I'm saying is I'm going to deflect onto everyone else responsibility for communication, rather than recognizing that sometimes people don't hear what I thought I meant at the time. Okay? How many of you ever communicated clearly with someone and then found that they didn't understand? A teacher that says, you understood exactly what I said. You ever heard him say that? Okay, what that's saying is I'm so proficient in the communication processes that no other utterance that has ever left my lips has been misconstrued in the slightest dimension by any living creature except you, Turkey. Okay, but is it possible that words have different meanings? Look at what's happened in language. My mom used to say, don't be bad. Now how do my kids praise me? You're bad, Dad. So bad is now the best thing I could be. I try real hard to be bad and get a good time. Oh, that's bad, Dad. And I'm supposed to take joy from that along the way. So language changes. And with the context, it takes on different meaning. So if I could just be non-defensive about it and say, although I thought I was clear on that, it's obvious that your interpretation was different from mine, so let me see if I can understand where we went astray. That would accept some ownership in the process. And then finally, okay, avoiding. Well, don't give me that. Okay, don't come to me with that kind of stuff. You're having problems, work it out. I told you what you needed to do. All that, again, is just saying if there's a problem here, it's on you. I'm not willing to share part of that. So he summarized it, showing power, giving you messages, advising, lecturing, judging, generic non-specific praise, name-calling. That's silly, you're dumb, I think you're a fool, along the way, interpreting. Well, I'm sure that what they meant was giving false assurance, attacking the other person instead of accepting shared responsibility, and then just avoiding the issues, sweeping them under the table, ignoring them and talking over the top of them, all tend to undercut these skills. Finally, we've discovered that when you run into a poor listener, you don't do well to just point out they're a poor listener. If you want to help them learn to listen, stop periodically when you sense a poor listener and say, okay, let me ask you to hold up for a minute before you respond. How many of you ever found people who start to talk right while you're talking? And if you want to stop that, just say, wait a minute, before you respond, let me first check out what's your understanding of what I've been trying to convey to you. What do you believe has been the issue from my point of view? Instead of repeat back what I said, which is demeaning, say, let me ask you to share back with me in your words what you believe I've been trying to say to you. That teaches the art of paraphrasing, and that will help a person in a supportive way slow down and be accountable, rather than just steaming along, giving false assurances that they understand and then not really understanding when all of the things are in perspective. Then I believe if we would get into those situations, family rituals, family traditions, where we discuss how we might go about a vacation, talk about what each person believes they could contribute. I believe that when we are willing to negotiate on some things, and the time to negotiate is before you've cut the deal. Time to negotiate on what time they'll be home is before they leave for the evening, not afterward. Once you've set the deal when you were both lucid and equally invested, follow through as we talked about on the other side, but do it without the anger, do it without the rage, do it without the judgment and the put-downs, because when support precedes a challenge, I can usually learn from you. When I feel that you've challenged me, discounted me, put me down, or judged me, I'm going to try to avoid you as much as possible. I'm going to try to avoid the issues and project them onto you. And then when life requires me to work effectively with others, I will not have those skills. So our basic tools here are to practice the art of negotiation in an environment that supports learning to do that. Avoid the roadblocks and use the alternative builders to effective communication. Convey empathy by inviting them with dignity into our world sometimes so that they can see without the lecture what it is that may be going on for us, so they can appreciate that other people may not have their same priorities or sense of reality. When they listen poorly, instead of judging them and putting them down, just slow down our pacing and ask them periodically to offer us back their understanding of what we're asking them to do. So through paraphrasing and modeling, they